Is Ethel Cain the new Lana Del Rey? Well, for the alt girls and gays that have an indescribable urine and crumbs in their bed, kinda. But in all seriousness, anyone who has actually listened to both Lana and Ethel knows they are clearly their own separate artists with distinct sounds and aesthetics. I mean, if we're gonna compare, Ethel Cain is more of a Southern Gothic Nicole, Dollanganger, Florence, Welch mix, and Lana Del Rey somewhere between Mazzy Star and Amy Winehouse. But what you also might be surprised to find is just how deep the lore surrounding both artists goes, how they are reacting to the same thing just in different ways, and the many movements and styles that have influenced them. Ever since Ethel Cain released Preacher's Daughter, she has gained a cult-like following, and with all that new attention came inevitable comparisons to other artists, especially Lana Del Rey, mostly due to their shared rural, religious, and Americana aesthetics. With the recent Ethel Cain hated my Instagram post Lana beef, these comparisons have only grown, and many of you from both fan bases have been asking me to make a video on both of them. So today, I want to do just that. Diving deep into the movements, aesthetics, and themes that define both artists, like the rose-tinted romanticization of Lana Del Rey, the Americana old money aesthetic and where it originates, the poets and movements that inspired her, and how the indie genre can sometimes influence artists to cosplay struggle regardless of their real-life experiences, and how this can both help and hurt those who actually do struggle. We will then discuss Ethel Cain, the Southern Gothic movement, trauma as a subversive tool in art, how a rural Christian upbringing influenced her work, and how even though Hayden's music isn't romantic in the same way Lana's is, fans still often react to her reclamation of rural aesthetics in a romantic way. We will then end by explaining how this new era of conceptual art, lore-heavy albums, and aesthetics-centered artists is not just a niche online trend, but a part of a larger, more interesting movement happening in modern culture. As our technology continues to advance, as online simulation continues to replace physical reality, the internet identities and personas we create will increasingly become more real than our actual lives.
This is Southern Gothic.
You're not from the South.
You won't understand.
I'm Lana Del Rey, and I'm a singer.
On August 13th, 2025, Lana Del Rey teased a snippet of the 13th track off her upcoming album titled All About Ethel. The track references her alleged negative past experiences with the singer Ethel Cain and has come to be known as a uniquely Lana Del Rey diss track online. Some people have called it Bigfoot for depressed girls and gays, a reference to the beef between Nicki Minaj and Megan Thee Stallion, and the infamous Bigfoot diss track Nicki Minaj released in response.
Ethel Cain hated my Instagram post.
Others have called it their 9/11, the Kendrick-Drake beef but for alt girls, and pointed how hard it is for those who are already fans of both Lana and Ethel during it all. The lyrics, Ethel Cain hated my Instagram posts, reenacting my Chicago pose, refer to an incident in 2022 when Lana Del Rey posted an image with Jack Donahue. In response, Ethel posted an older picture of herself with Jack, which was later deleted. Many saw this as shady, or was at least Hayden clearly trolling Lana. In a now deleted Instagram comment, Lana explained, "I didn't know who Ethel was until a few years ago, when someone brought to my attention the disturbing and graphic side-by-side images she would often put of me next to unflattering creatures and cartoon characters, making constant comments about my weight. I was confused at what she was getting at. Then when I heard what she was saying behind closed doors from mutual friends and started inserting herself into my personal life, I was definitely disturbed." This entire situation led to a back and forth, with Hayden pointing out that she never dated Jack Donahue, and her fans bringing up old tweets where she explicitly said she didn't have anything against Lana and enjoyed her work, just that she felt it wasn't fair to compare the two. In a tweet from back in 2022, Hayden said, "For the millionth time, I love and respect Lana. I just think it's lazy and a disservice to both of us to compare us and completely erase the nuance that we both put into our work. I have nothing bad to say about her. She's a legend. Please leave me alone. Hayden also spoke on comparisons to Lana in a Studio One interview from back in 2021, explaining how Lana Del Rey is more of a stylized, glamorous look at the American dream, while the Ethel Cain character is more of the unapologetic, dark, broke version.
Let me just start building the basic foundation of Ethel Cain, which is the ethereal vocals, the old Kodak photos of me as a kid. Let me build up this imagery as an all-American Southern girl growing up, nowhere near the lap of luxury, kind of that failed American dream aesthetic. I got a lot of comparisons to Lana Del Rey early on, which I always thought was funny because I feel like Lana Del Rey is very about the glamour and the glitz and the opulence of America.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm very much the opposite of that. It's like broke bitches and trailer parks, but like for real.
Many people also pointed out that way back in November of 2017, Hayden released a cover of Born to Die when she was planning on releasing her now scrapped SoundCloud album titled Covers. In other past interviews, Hayden has said that when she was first introduced to Lana in the early 2010s, she enjoyed her work, but as the political landscape changed and she got older, she viewed her stylization of trauma and romanticization of modernist America as disingenuous, a sham, and even naive. This early critique of Lana's work, as well as Hayden's stan Twitter past, messy tweets, and dark humor, has led people to think she has something against Lana or even specifically dislikes her. Many Lana fans viewed the fact that Hayden removes any mentions of Del Rey from her Wikipedia page, as well as those old tweets and Lana criticisms, as proof that Hayden is obsessed with Lana in a shady way, while Ethel's fans point out that Hayden just doesn't like being compared to Lana because it dilutes her creative individuality when they are separate, nuanced artists. This is all to say that this beef has had one major narrative emerging from it, which was that, from Lana fans' point of view, Ethel wasn't like Lana, but that she clearly wished to be, and from many Ethel fans' point of view, Lana was punching down and bitter at a younger artist's success. This compare and contrast narrative has actually been around for a while in certain fan circles, with some saying Ethel Cain was something like the new Lana Del Rey, or at least the queer Lana Del Rey for the 2020s, which brings us to the topic of this video. Ever since Ethel Cain began getting traction, people have endlessly compared her to Lana Del Rey, and before I actually even listened to Ethel and read up on all the lore, I thought they were similar as well, but they really aren't, at least in the same way someone like Remy Bon is to Lana. Ethel and Lana are more like two separate reactions to the same thing being reflected in two very different ways. Ethel Cain is the American experience reflected through a dark, unapologetic Southern Gothic lens. Lana Del Rey is the American experience reflected through a more romanticized American modernist lens. What they both share, however, is a mythologization of their real-life experiences into aestheticized, lore-heavy world building. Lana Del Rey was born Elizabeth Woolridge Grant on June 21, 1985 in Manhattan, New York, before moving upstate and growing up in the rural village of Lake Placid. Lana has said that growing up, she always felt like she didn't belong, suffered from depression, and was plagued by anxious existential thoughts, saying, "When I was very young, I was sort of floored by the fact that my mother and my father and everyone I knew was going to die, and myself too. I had a sort of philosophical crisis. I couldn't believe that we were mortal. For some reason, that knowledge sort of overshadowed my experience. I was unhappy for some time. I got into a lot of trouble. I used to drink a lot. That was a hard time in my life." These dark thoughts and struggles with depression led to an alcohol dependency and getting sent to Kent boarding school when she was 14 to help her get sober. When Lana was 18, she enrolled in Fordham University in the Bronx and decided to major in philosophy with a fascination with metaphysics. This is where we first get a glimpse into what would influence the future artistry of Lana Del Rey. Aristotle said metaphysics was the first philosophy, with this branch focusing on fundamental questions about reality, existence, and the nature of being. Lana has said on Tumblr that she chose to study metaphysics because she wanted to, quote, bridge the gap between God and science, but also went into more depth in an Electronic Beats interview from 2013 saying, "Well, I graduated with a metaphysics degree and I loved philosophy. I've kind of gone back to things that made me feel excited about learning maybe 6 years ago when I was still in school. When asked about what new themes were inspiring her work at the time, she says, "Well, I mixed it with my studies in theology because it was the best school for the Jesuit faith and all the Jesuits taught philosophy classes. There was just a lot of talk about going back to that basic question, why do we exist? How did reality come to be? Why do we do what we do? And how not to become the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the guardians of the middle class." That really interested me. I don't know. Yeah, I love being around people who wondered why we were here. Lana's early childhood thoughts about existence and reality, as well as her choice to study philosophy and theology in college, would help to influence her future work and the existential thread that consistently runs through much of it. While much of her work is often romantic and stylized, it's commonly contrasted with dark existential questioning like the existence of God, happiness, love, and inevitable tragedy. Songs about how much she loves someone with a seemingly random lyric about how God is dead. Songs that seem romantic at first, but also question reality and issues occurring globally. While Lana was in college, she would end up moving in with her aunt in Brooklyn, serving tables to make money, while her uncle showed her a few chords on the guitar, which is where her music career officially began.
It's pretty exciting to have made it all the way to the finals. I hoped that I would, and I think we all agree that we wish it could last even longer because we've had such a good time.
Lana would start her career under several different names, from May Jailer, Sparkle Jump Rope Queen, and the gangster Nancy Sinatra, before settling on Lizzy Grant for a while. While many of the songs from the May Jailer Sirens era would come to be loved by future fans, most of her unreleased work would come from the Lizzy Grant days and the early Lana Del Rey with an A demo days. Under Lizzy Grant, we got the Kill Kill EP, then Lana's first studio album, Lizzy Grant aka Lana Del Rey in 2010, which was later scrapped and removed from iTunes due to Lana getting signed by bigger labels in 2011, and the real beginning of the mainstream Lana Del Rey with an E era we've all come to know. Now, while TikTok has helped Lana get a much larger mainstream fan base in recent years, many new fans are only aware of her mainstream work and not the underground, unreleased persona and the lore that really drew early fans to her when she first broke out and all her past stuff got leaked online when her laptop got stolen from her car. I've made an entire documentary and literally so many deep dives on Lana already, so if you want a documentary style deep dive on Lana's unreleased music, I would watch those videos for more on all that. But to briefly summarize, Lana's early persona and work were quite different from her current highly polished, glamorous, old money aesthetic. What has come to be known as Lizzy Grant core or Lana Del Rey vinyl tends to refer to her early style of work where she lived in a trailer park and produced music that was a lot more experimental, simplistic, bare bones, and even just low budget.
This is one of the most fun. Has there been a crime here recently? No. Okay, I was just curious because there's a police line, do not cross, all over the trailer. Oh, jeez, well, maybe
Around 2005 to 2007, Lana Del Rey moved into a New Jersey trailer park where she would write and produce much of her unreleased work before her mainstream success with Born to Die. This early trailer park image and the themes of tragedy, working class poverty, crime, and mental illness in this work have come to define Lana in the lore-heavy aesthetic she represents. Ever since Lana gained mainstream traction on YouTube and Tumblr, and with the discovery of that seemingly endless collection of unreleased songs, she has also come to be known as a modern symbol of romanticization. Now, the original romantic movement began in Europe in the late 18th century and was in response to the rigid values of the Enlightenment. Romanticism appreciated emotions, individuality, heroes and tragedy, the dark or disturbing, childlike mindsets, the spiritual, nostalgia, and especially the irrational. It inspired people to return to a more fluid, abstract, even paradoxical way of viewing the world instead of the restraints of pure logic and reason from the Enlightenment. Now, to be fair, Romanticism as a movement never truly went away, and what we see occurring today isn't new, but is more like a modern mutation of the original due to new technologies and societal pressures.
What now, my dear?
I'm so cute now.
Oh, you're disgusting. Whoa, loser. Shut
shut the fuck up.
So due to the internet and especially the cheap availability of home cameras and then the release of the smartphone and social media, we could now all be the main characters of our own lives, documenting everything we did and posting it for everyone else to see. Social media and the smartphone began to shift how we viewed our lives and everyday experiences because now we could capture it, edit it, and post it, which helped make it inherently feel more special and significant, which automatically made us gravitate towards something like romanticization. Social media also made everything optimizable, and new powerful algorithms helped create a culture of aestheticization, which would later evolve into core culture and the obsession we now have with simulating niche online trends, becoming a lot more possible thanks to something like fast fashion. The other compounding factor that inspired this modern resurgence in Romanticism was societal changes and economic decline. So first, due to the rise of globalization in the 90s and Western nations being hollowed out for lower wages overseas, then the 2008 Great Recession, which was nearly a depression, both came together to facilitate a decline in living standards that has never really been reversed. This made some people more inclined to turn inward and romanticize their lives to cope. Instead of maybe viewing their lives through a logical lens and seeing how objectively shitty it was, some were influenced to sink into irrationality, nostalgia, and romanticism, choosing to grant their situation meaning and artistic significance regardless of how bad it really was, which helped make the artistry of someone like Lana Del Rey quite appealing at just the right time. Similar to hard times encouraging introspection and nostalgic reflection, we find Lana responds to America's economic decline and structural issues with nostalgia for the golden age of capitalism, or the period after World War II when American industry boomed, living standards skyrocketed, and the American middle class experienced prosperity like never before. We see this sentiment expressed in the Ride music video, where Lana says, "I believe in the country America used to be."
I believe in the country America used to be.
This is where we find the origins of the mid-century modern aesthetic that has come to represent her. So due to a mixture of the actual material advantages of that period, boomers and their nostalgia affecting culture, and the endless films, music, and books romanticizing the decades after World War II, people continue to view it as almost utopian, and we have seen multiple nostalgic throwbacks of it dating as far back as the 70s and 80s. Lana's appreciation of the past and use of romanticism is both loved and criticized by many, and I think regardless of personal opinion, both sides can be logically appreciated. Like I just touched on, romanticism is a powerful tool and can help people shift their perspectives to something that aligns more with mindfulness, appreciating what they have and their experiences without judgment, and deciding that it all has value because it's art. I'm a Lana fan, and as someone who has actually been through a lot of shitty stuff, I think this is exactly what she helped to show me and countless other people. My pain and suffering weren't in vain because it was significant and could even be beautiful. Poverty wasn't a curse, it was poetic. Drug use, trauma, and relationship dysfunction weren't things you should want to avoid. They could now be seen as character building and helping make your personal life narrative beautiful and interesting. After all, every good story tends to have some form of tragedy. What Lana showed people was how to transform everything in their life into art, no matter what, and it helped many feel like they had new agency over their own happiness with just a simple shift of perspective. On the flip side, others saw Lana's use of romanticism as disingenuous, inauthentic, and even dangerous. I mean, it's one thing if Lana was naturally disadvantaged, growing up in a trailer park instead of choosing to live in one when her family comes from old money. Her romanticization of poverty, crime, drug use, and mental illness looked to some like promotion and could be dangerous if taken literally. Some also felt that convincing people that poverty or trauma was beautiful could lead to complacency and dangerously irrational worldviews. I mean, it's easy for rich people who choose to struggle to view it as poetic, but what about those who are forced into that situation with no way out? Is it fair or ethical to portray them in unrealistic ways? Maybe convincing others to view poverty and struggle as poetic is dangerous because it can cause those who need genuine help to reject it, instead sinking into irrational fantasy, indulging in harmful behaviors, because with romanticism, it's not bad and ugly, it's beautiful and artsy. So yes, Lana's early work and use of Romanticism is often loved and hated, but Romanticism itself has always also kind of been controversial in general because it naturally rejects rationality and obsesses over the dark and taboo. But Lana isn't just influenced by existentialism and philosophy, tragedy, and Romanticism. She also has a taste for American modernism and many different poets.
With music strong I come, with my cornets and my drums.
At the beginning of an older, unofficial Cola music video, Lana recites a famous poem by the American poet Walt Whitman, which goes, "With music strong I come, with my cornets and my drums. I play not marches for accepted victors only. I play marches for conquered and slain persons. Have you heard that it was good to gain the day? I also say it is good to fall. Battles are lost in the same spirit in which they are won. I beat and pound for the dead. I blow through my umptures my loudest and gayest for them. Vivas to those who have failed, and to those whose war vessels sank in the sea, and to those themselves who sank in the sea, and to all generals that lost engagements, and all overcome heroes, and the numberless unknown heroes equal to the greatest heroes known." This poem was about war and expresses the idea that victory and failure are both valuable in the end, promotes a sort of concept of universal inclusion, and basically has a theme of nothing is ever for nothing, everything counts for something, and all experience is valuable no matter the outcome. We also have Body Electric, another song that directly references the poem by Walt Whitman, as well as the lyric "Whitman is my daddy" from Cola. Walt Whitman was an American poet and writer who came to be known as the father of free verse. Walt was often seen as controversial and overly sensual for his time, incorporating transcendentalism and realism into his work. Transcendentalism emerged from 19th century America and was a philosophical and literary movement that sought to escape many aspects of the modern world, which were seen as unnatural, artificial, and corrupting, in favor of the self-reliant, individual, natural, and spiritual. It promoted a belief of universal unity in all creation, believes in the inherent goodness of all people, and that introspective intuition is better at revealing universal truth than pure logic and reason. Realism refers to literary realism, which seeks to portray things in the real world as accurate and straightforward instead of corrupting it with human emotion, speculation, exaggeration, or distortion. So in some ways, you could see Walt's work as paradoxical and unique, using contrasting techniques in fascinating ways. Transcendentalism was subjective and emotional, realism focused on reality and objectivity. Whitman's work was often spiritual, introspective, and focused on the individual, while at the same time also appreciating the collective and societal issues as a whole. Does this use of paradoxical themes sound familiar? Because it should. One thing I have always loved about Lana is how paradoxical a lot of her work and the themes within it are, and how this contrast makes each opposing topic in her work stand out even more. Examples I've talked about before include Lana's spiritual and religious references juxtaposed with nihilistic God is dead sentiments, her merging of tragedy with beauty, her use of retro aesthetics merged with modern scientific or even futuristic imagery, or even sonically experimenting with classical vintage sounds and modern hip-hop, trap, or electronic ones. In an interview from 2014, Lana is asked about her influences, saying, "Yes, Allen Ginsberg was an early influence, the whole beat poetry movement, and Vladimir Nabokov and Walt Whitman. I think the thing I really got from Ginsberg was that you can tell a story through kind of painting pictures with words. And when I found out that you could have a profession doing that, it was thrilling to me. It just became my passion immediately, playing with words and poetry." Allen Ginsberg was an American poet and writer, often viewed as one of the most influential during the Beat movement. Ginsberg was a vocal critic of American militarism, consumerist capitalism, sexual repression, and highly influenced the ideas of the growing 60s counterculture. Ginsberg, as well as Kerouac and Burroughs, were highly influential in the creation of the Beat literary movement, with their work often focusing on exploring spirituality, specifically Eastern spirituality, celebrating non-conformity, promoting skepticism of the system, and was often seen from the outside as bohemian, hedonistic, hippie, counterculture nonsense.
No split levels, no Cadillacs, no commuter's bridge, appalling weight. Like, I mean, what are they doing with their lives?
Some were inspired by the Beatniks, a small but conspicuous group of young adults in the big cities who dabbled in marijuana, wrote poetry, and won scores of imitators in high schools all over the country.
Cellophane wrapped in the black nightmare of the endless factory. My soul squeezed in the hydraulic press of eternal drip, drip, drip.
Beat poetry was a spontaneous, free verse style of poetry which was heavily inspired by the rhythm of jazz, stream of consciousness-like art forms, Eastern philosophy, spiritual liberation, rebellion, and transgression. So when Lana says she gets down like beat poetry, she is referencing how, at the time, the beatniks and their literary movements were not only considered rebellious and innovative, but were the next new thing all the kids were doing and were seen as cool and trendy. Some other notable examples of artists that influenced Lana would be Nabokov with Lolita, F. Scott Fitzgerald in themes of tragic love and American glamour, Nietzsche in her God is Dead lyric, Oscar Wilde in her often saying that life imitates art, her entire album named after the American artist Norman Rockwell, to one of her biggest inspirations, Sylvia Plath. A You Discover article from June 2025 detailing Lana's many inspirations writes, leading up to the release of Ocean Boulevard, Lana wrote on her Instagram, "This was the evening of Blue Bannister's reviews. They called it diaristic, and I thought of you and that poem you love about the fig tree, and how she was trying to figure out which fig to choose, but they all sort of looked alright, and she never had the time to choose just one. And then I wrote this album, and I picked one." The passage in question comes from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, the only novel published by the confessional poet before her death in 1963. Esther, a semi-autobiographical version of Plath, compares choosing a life path to sitting at the bottom of a fig tree, starving as a result of her indecision. "I wanted each and every one of them," Plath writes, "but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet." Lana has often been compared to Plath for the sadness in her poetry, lyrics, and delivery, and she even describes herself as a 24/7 Sylvia Plath during Hope is a Dangerous Thing for a Woman Like Me to Have, But I Have It.
I've been tearing around in my fucking nightgown, 24/7 Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath was an American poet and writer born in 1932 who is often credited with advancing the genre of confessional poetry. Plath suffered from severe depression and an abusive, chaotic marriage, which ultimately culminated in her suicide in 1963. Sylvia Plath's work was stark, at times dark and full of rage, emotional and unapologetic, focusing on many themes that were often seen as controversial for a woman in the 1950s. Plath has become a tragic, almost mythical figure in poetry due to her life and death, and many see her as a symbol of visibility and relatability, with her work touching on many things that others may feel too scared to openly express. Lana is often compared so much to Sylvia due to these romanticizing tragedy, dark, depression-based unapologetic themes. As of August 27th, it has also come out that Lana will be naming her next album Stove,
whatever you say, Stove,
which many have wondered is a direct reference to Sylvia Plath or the tragic way she committed suicide, although I'm sure it will change about 2 more times before the album is actually finally released. So when taking a step back, Lana's work clearly deals with multiple issues and topics. Her early childhood thoughts and struggles with alcoholism, as well as her religious and philosophical studies in college, helped give her a diverse foundation to build from for her work. Lana touches on many different themes, from romanticism and stylizing trauma to feel glamorous and beautiful, contrasted with constant skepticism and existentialism, to indulging in nostalgia and past poets and artists, to spirituality, Christian mysticism, and mythologizing her life to create detailed, lore-heavy narratives. Ethel Cain has a similarly fascinating backstory and wealth of inspirations. Ethel Cain, whose real name is Hayden Silas Anehdonia, was born on March 24, 1998 in Tallahassee, Florida, before moving about an hour away to the small town of Perry and being raised there. Perry is a small, Bible Belt, southern rural town, and Hayden's parents were both active in the local Baptist church, with her father being a church deacon and her mother singing in the choir. Hayden was also homeschooled, with the media and culture she was allowed to consume having to be Christ-friendly. It's also important to know that Hayden is transgender and was assigned male at birth before coming out as gay in her early teens and then transitioning in her late teens. In a 2022 Them Mag interview, Hayden says, "Everything in my life revolved around church. Everyone I knew went to our church. I wasn't allowed to hang out with people who didn't. My life was entirely for Jesus." Hayden has also said that growing up in the South felt like a place frozen in time, with much of the technology being outdated and spending much of her childhood between her parents' and grandparents' houses and trailers.
When you grow up in small towns, especially in the South, I feel like everything is very like behind the times. So like, you know, I was a kid in the 2000s, but everything there was very like 90. I grew up with VHS. We didn't get the DVD player till I was like probably 6 or 7. It's just kind of like permanent nostalgia.
This can help explain her future appreciation for VHS and 90s aesthetics and culture. So not to compare right away, but this is where we find one of the biggest differences between Lana and Hayden, with Hayden centering her aesthetic and sound around the place and culture she actually grew up in, whereas many viewed Lana's appreciation for blue-collar Southern life as inauthentic, being that she comes from a wealthy, old-money New England family. Around the age of 12, Hayden began to notice that she liked boys and came out to her family. She says, "I had the usual anxieties of a child, but when I told my family I liked boys, all hell broke loose. Everyone thought I was a freak. I was stalked by adults who didn't even go to our church through their children's social media accounts. It was like a witch hunt." This experience of alienation and rejection would help her learn to carve her own path early on, unafraid to delve into deep, dark taboo themes. This also doesn't just apply to queer people, by the way, but can honestly happen to all forms of minorities, because when you are othered from a very early age, you stop attempting to fit in because you know it's futile, which can make you more likely to express yourself in authentic, unapologetic, or unique ways. Conformity and social acceptance become largely impossible, so unapologetic expression and creative innovation fill its place. When Hayden was around 20, she came out as transgender and began transitioning. Hayden is also autistic and has often explained how neurodivergence affects her experience and production of music, helping her to visualize sounds in three-dimensional spatial ways and attach immense emotions to music, saying, "I genuinely feel bad for non-autistic people who will never know what music can truly feel like. I'm autistic, and so that definitely heightens sensory to everything. I think that's why I have so much crossover between media, because it's like there's never just one sense. Music is not just something you listen to. Film is not just something you watch. You get all these senses from all these things. When I'm producing music, I literally feel sometimes I can see it. I have to close my eyes and I imagine the bass is the earth. I imagine the synths are rising up next to you, and I imagine the vocals are high in the sky, right in the center. I close my eyes and picture the sound around me. That's how I mix." In 2017, Hayden enrolled in Florida State University before dropping out to focus on music production. This is where we find one of Hayden's biggest inspirations in her creative process: film. When asked about what inspired her to start making music, she says, "It kind of started backwards. I wanted to make films, but I didn't have access to film equipment and couldn't make them. I was like, if I were making a film and I was going to make a soundtrack for it, what would that soundtrack sound like?" I personally think art's goal is to accurately express individual human experience, and I think based off that definition, film is the most successful at doing so, so I definitely understand Hayden's appreciation for it. What Hayden has mastered in a different way, though, is combining film, music, and storytelling to create something that feels sort of in between. Not really one thing, not really the other. Kinda like a song or soundtrack, kinda like a novel. Hayden has said she was influenced by several different films and directors, saying, "I love Ridley Scott, Andrea Arnold, Harmony Korine, and quite a few others. I love really visceral, blunt storytelling. Thelma and Louise was a huge inspiration to me as I wrote this record. It will always be my favorite film of all time."
Don't put your hands on your head, please. Louise. What? Shoot the radio. The police radio, Louise.
Thelma and Louise is a film about two women who decide to go on a weekend road trip across the western US, which ultimately ends in a tragic but satisfying way. Thelma is a sheltered housewife trapped in a suffocating marriage with a controlling man, while Louise is a confident, independent woman who works as a waitress but suffered SA in the past, which shapes her distrust of the legal system, hatred of Texas, and later violent decisions.
You let her go, you fucking asshole, or I'm gonna splatter your ugly face all over this nice car.
The film is basically a story of transformation, growth, and escape, with Thelma becoming strong and bold like Louise, and the two doing what needs to be done for their own safety in the face of male abuse, which leads to them also running from the police. The film ends with them driving off the Grand Canyon, choosing to live a life of freedom and liberation on their own terms rather than surrender to legal punishment. We see similar themes of isolation, patriarchy, repression, trauma, and the freedom of death in the album Preacher's Daughter. Both Thelma and Ethel Cain begin their lives in positions of isolation and repression, and eventually escape their small towns, go on the road, with Thelma growing into an independent, self-determining woman and choosing her own death in a final act of rebellion, while Ethel succumbs to her trauma in the form of dangerous decisions and is ultimately abused and murdered. However, both stories end on similar notes by presenting death as a transcendent escape from the struggles in their life. In the album Preacher's Daughter, we also find track number 10 titled August Underground, an instrumental that details the violent murder of the Ethel Cain character after being kidnapped, abused, drugged, and pimped out by Isaiah. The title, August Underground, is said to be a reference to the infamous 2001 horror exploitation film of the same name. August Underground is a lost footage, amateur shot style film that follows the actions of Peter and an accomplice while they film themselves kidnapping, torturing, SAing, and murdering people, usually women. One of the last victims of the film was a male tattoo artist who was bludgeoned to death and had his leg cut off, which may have also inspired the ultimate chopping up and cannibalization of the Ethel Cain character. There is the 9th track, Ptolemaea, which was originally named Shenandoah, which Hayden has said was a reference to a No Sleep podcast she had listened to right before producing the song. The No Sleep podcast is described on its YouTube channel description as a multi-award-winning horror storytelling podcast featuring live stream performances, interviews, and other show-related videos from the cast and crew. There is also the last track from Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You, titled Waco, Texas, which Hayden has said is inspired by the Branch Davidians cult started by a Christian preacher, which ultimately ended with the FBI raiding the compound and a fire destroying and killing many of the members. So as we can see, a lot of the themes in Hayden's work are quite dark, morbid, or taboo, and I know that some people are just naturally more inclined to gravitate towards the macabre, like obsessing over crime shows or documentaries, but I actually think something else may have also predisposed her to be interested in these topics. As we know, Hayden was raised in the church, and I think it can be argued that the story of Christianity is already quite macabre and death cultish itself. The main symbol of the religion, the crucifix, a symbol of unbearable Roman punishment and death, is venerated and associated with resurrection, love, and divinity. When you enter a church, you are often greeted with a giant depiction of a dead, tortured man, but billions collectively view it as a symbol of love. There is the veneration of the saints and martyrs in the Catholic Church, with dead bodies and bones on display, which are often seen positively as sacred and holy. We see an ancient obsession with female sexuality in the form of Mary and virgin purity, but also the constant repression of it in demonization of natural sexual behavior. What we find in the Christian religion is paradox and subversion, flipping certain things on their head by associating them with beauty, love, and joy, which on the surface are anything but. Similarly, we not only see this veneration of taboo in Ethel Cain's work, but also in Lana Del Rey's. Many of the subjects they both touch on are not only dark, but also controversial, being used as tools to express some sort of artistic narrative which subverts and innovates. Now, I know that many Christians would argue that these symbols aren't meant to literally venerate death itself and are supposed to represent liberation from it through forgiveness and the ultimate sacrifice. But my point is that the normalization of these things as not only important but literally divine might maybe lead people who are raised in the church to have a fascination with similar stories because they're just so used to them. Christianity didn't just affect Hayden's interest in macabre, taboo, or cult-like stories, but also the style and production of her music as well. I grew up in choir and just always enjoyed singing around the house, and I even wrote a shitty little album at 15 as an ode to my idol at the time, Florence Welch, because I wanted to be her so badly when I grew up. My mom was very strict on us only being allowed to listen to Christian music, but my dad would play old country rock in the truck when we were alone, so it created this weird stylistic intersection in my head that nobody was really feeling. By the time I was 19, I was really itching for that very specific kind of music that no one was making, so I just decided to bite the bullet and try making it myself. This is why for many of us who were also raised in the church, you might find that a lot of Hayden's songs sound similar to Christian worship music, with my personal favorite being Sun-Bleached Flies, which literally made me feel exactly how Christian music used to, except in a much deeper, darker, profound way. Hayden would also end up befriending, collaborating, and opening for Nicole Dollanganger, and has said she was one of her biggest inspirations alongside Florence Welch.
Hi, Chicago. Hi. My name is Ethel. I will be singing for you tonight.
But probably the number one theme that defines and inspires Hayden's work would be the Southern Gothic movement. According to Wikipedia, Southern Gothic refers to an artistic subgenre of fiction, music, film, theater, and television that is heavily influenced by Gothic elements in the American South. Common themes of Southern Gothic include storytelling of deeply flawed, disturbing, or eccentric characters, sometimes having physical deformities or insanity, decayed or derelict settings and grotesque situations, and sinister events bred from poverty, alienation, crime, violence, forbidden sexuality, or hoodoo magic.
You're not from the South. You won't understand.
In an interview with The Face, Hayden says, "I think there are two types of Southern Gothic. There's the theatrical version, which is how people who are not from the South think of it, and there's the real Southern Gothic. Theatrical is old, spooky churches, the witches in the swamp, alligators and snakes. But there's a subtlety to the real Southern Gothic. It's still the churches, but it's not dark and creepy. It's actually bright and sunny and creepy. It's hot, it's humid, your head is swimming, and you hear crickets and cicadas all day. Time moves differently down here. Other places in the country have a full 4 seasons. Down here, it's just the same thing every day year-round. You lose your sense of the passage of time." She goes on, "The people down here committed a lot of grave atrocities against other human beings, and I think that is something that you can feel in the air very palpably. There's a tension that never really goes away. I want to be careful about describing it in any way that could make it sound like an aesthetic, because it's not. It's history. Too much has happened on this land to not be dark and terrifying even years later. It's like the ground is soaked in blood and the trees have drunk it up." And right here, we can see another huge difference between Ethel Cain and Lana Del Rey. Ethel Cain is more about the reality of a situation. The dark rot festering just beneath the surface of something, unapologetically exploring every blood-stained, fly-infested, moldy corner. Like Hayden says, "I want to be careful not to turn it into an aesthetic. This isn't about watering something down to become palatable, beautiful, popular, or trendy. It's about unapologetically facing the hidden reality of something, blood, guts, and all." But this is also where I do still think Ethel Cain represents romanticization, just in an indirect, unintentional way. Hayden has said multiple times that she doesn't want her work to be seen as glamorization, and I personally don't think she is doing any of that in her work. What I do think is happening instead is that the outside reaction, specifically from fans, is leading to an aestheticization and romanticization of the themes and image she's come to represent. So yes, on paper, Ethel Cain is just reclaiming a culture that was long ago stripped from many queer people, and from this point of view, I see that as a good thing, but I also think we live in such a consumerist world where now it's kinda inevitable that anything and everything will be commodified no matter if the originator of said thing says not to, because the way people now think is so rooted in self-image, current trends, and the optimization of your online persona due to things like social media and the commodification of identity. Okay, so based on everything we just covered, is Ethel Cain the new Lana Del Rey? Well, obviously not, because they are two completely different artists with nuanced backstories, inspirations, and artistic styles. Lana Del Rey is like this simulation of modernist America, but with its themes, music, and fashion being reflected through a contemporary, self-aware, postmodern lens. She has touched on several taboo themes in the past, but her art-making process centers more on beautification, stylization, and romanticization. Lana Del Rey takes the ugly, the dark, and the traumatic and rebrands it into something so attractive and aestheticized that it's almost desirable. She paints pictures with words, and there is no good, bad, or ugly in her artistry. There is just experience and the pursuit of artistic beauty.
We had nothing to lose, nothing to gain, nothing we desired anymore, except to make our lives into a work of art. I believe in the country America used to be. I believe in the person I want to become.
On the other hand, Ethel Cain is an unapologetic look into trauma and abuse presented through a Southern Gothic lens. Ethel Cain doesn't attempt to make horror and tragedy look beautiful, because it isn't. She lets it be honest, raw, and exposed, no matter how shocking or horrific. I guess another way I kind of view Lana and Ethel is like, Lana is a romantic poet, turning lemons into lemonade and constantly finding beautiful inspiration everywhere. Ethel is more of a documentarian, a journalist who exposes the dark, forgotten, or hidden underbelly of society. Wherever she goes, she specifically looks for the tragic that everyone so desperately tries to hide because it's interesting, and once it's exposed, it can help create important conversations on suppressed issues.
And so it started off as kind of a, how funny would it be to call an album perverse? People would really be like, what the actual hell, Ethel Cain, what are you doing? And then it becomes an unpacking of, well, let's see, like, let's actually talk about it. Let's discuss this taboo, really.
Ethel Cain uses religious metaphors and allegory, ambient soundtrack like instrumentals, and lore-heavy albums to tell a dark and horrific story, but one that is tragically still common for so many. However, I do think both Ethel Cain and Lana Del Rey share one really big fascinating thing in common, and that is their use of art to mythologize their lives. Now, Lana Del Rey doesn't really specifically say she mythologizes for her music, or that the events often described in it are sometimes exaggerated or made up, but anyone who is aware of her massive unreleased work and her actual life knows she definitely spruced up some of it to make good art, and I think she succeeded. In the same way, while many of the events in Preacher's Daughter are inspired by Hayden's real-life experiences, Ethel Cain is still a fictional character in her recent 2 albums, conceptual ones. I honestly think that this mythologizing life, becoming the main character of your own story aspect of both of their work, is the most fascinating out of everything we've talked about in this video. While nothing about any of this is new, I think it still shows an interesting trend occurring in modern culture at large. Yes, we live in a world that is increasingly more simulated and artificial, and I know I've already talked about the inauthenticity crisis happening right now and how consumerist fast fashion influences people to cosplay everything. But I think when we look at the conceptual nature of these artists, we also see something that is both new and ancient, artistic, but also beneficial. So, I'm an artist myself who has made so many pieces based on my own experiences and mythologizing them into something more significant. And I think for people who aren't artists, but who can also appreciate others' art, like Lana Del Rey or Ethel Cain, you may not understand just how powerful making art can be from a first-hand perspective. Like we talked about earlier with romanticization and how it can help train people to be more mindful and find happiness in the ordinary. Mythologizing your life in the pursuit of art can help you cope with not just trauma, but literally life itself. It becomes a way to take all this abstract, non-physical, horrific, beautiful, confusing stuff up here and bring it down into the earthly, making it tangible and more accessible. It gives it significance and visibility, value, and better comprehension. This is why I say that what Lana, Ethel, and really all artists do is also ancient. It's what we've seen all throughout history. Individuals, tribes, leaders, peoples, and nations creating stories and art inspired by real-life events, but that are still mythologized in some way to help accurately express their significance. These stories exist somewhere between fact and fiction, reality and myth, and that's what makes them so powerful and interesting. In some ways, the smartphone camera has turned us all into artists ourselves, documenting our lives and posting them for all to see, which also inherently gives every moment we experience a bit more value. This ability to capture anything at any time and personally curate and optimize how we are perceived gives us that same ability Lana and Ethel also have to be the narrators of our own novels. In this way, we all understand the value of writing our own story, turning our lives into art, and mythologizing our trauma, with most of us consistently existing somewhere between reality and simulation, truth and art, lived experience and living to experience. And while this form of artistic mythologization has always existed, what our technology is allowing and will continue to allow will be the disillusion of the objective self. The nuanced person that is who you actually are, regardless of perception. The one born from all your life's moments, good, bad, and unthinkable, indescribably beautiful, and unbearably painful. This real-world version of you that exists between who you wish to be and how others actually perceive you will continue to become less and less relevant as we continue to dissolve into hyper-customizable simulation, with some of us eventually even merging with our technology and literally becoming our art itself. Like the abstract shape-shifting shadows under a tree, we will exist in a state of constant fluid-like flux, consistently shape-shifting into whatever our thoughts desire, expressing ourselves in ways incomprehensible to us in the present. Maybe one day we won't have to believe in the person we want to become, we will instead just imagine it, and there it will be.